So, good evening, everyone, and let us begin the evening with a period of meditation. So, if you would like to adopt a posture which is most suitable for you, there are no real hard and fast rules about how to sit in meditation, but we can observe that whereas the placing of our legs, the placing of our hands does not affect the meditation process significantly, the spine certainly does. And so whether you're sitting on a chair or on the floor, try to keep straight back, but not rigidly straight. Like think of a redwood tree, think of Mount Fuji, think of something which is straight but in a natural, unforced way. So meditation is a very special activity, we could say artificial activity, in that it provides us the opportunity to practice the Dhamma in a situation in which we minimize all the possible obstructions to practice and maximize the supporting conditions. That's really the main difference between practicing in formal style and practicing in daily life, the control that we exert over the external situation. And I include by that our body and our posture. Now, motivation is vitally important. We must be very clear why exactly we are meditating, for what purpose. Again, we can observe that if we have gaining ideas in our mind that we want to practice meditation in order to get this result or that result, such motivation is not helpful at all. And our mind, even before we've watched our first breath, our mind is already caught up in tanha, craving. So we need to establish dhammacanda in our minds. This is the skillful alternative to tanha as motivation. And dhammacanda may rise very naturally when you come to sit meditation in a conducive place at a conducive time, but that's not true every time that we sit. And if your mind is a little bit agitated, not really ready to settle down, don't force it, but revise. Come back to your inspiration and the suffering and the problems that you've experienced in your life through having an untrained mind, which is the prey, or easy prey, of greed, hatred, and delusion, and the advantages and the benefits of training the mind to let go of defilement. We may also, for example, bring to mind memories, images of great teachers that you look up to and revere. taking just a little bit of time at the beginning of the meditation to get your motivation right can save a lot of wasted effort or misdirected effort. So in meditation, these days, I think there's maybe too much emphasis placed on technique because it gives you the idea there's this kind of special way of meditating, one particular method that's right for you, and it will sort of open the doors to peace and insight. But there's no shortcuts here. And the technique is only one part of the story. What we're trying to do in meditation, whatever the object, is that we're giving the mind a job to do, a very simple job. For example, when we breathe in, we know we breathe in. When we breathe out, we know we breathe out. So no great study is needed to begin this practice. But what happens when we do that is that it exposes the various mental states that cause us suffering in life. So when we meditate, when we begin to meditate, and there's a torrent of agitation and thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future and so on and so forth, this is not an indication that you have little good karma, little barami, that you're not good at this, but you are learning. So this meditation, try to look on it as a learning process, as an education. So before you can abandon the defilements, you have to see them. And the way you get to see them, and see them as defilements, not as you or some part of you or belonging to you, you go against the stream of defilement by having the mind stay with one thing. And when you do that, then as the mind is pulled here and pulled there, you have a new perspective on what's going on in your mind. These are now distractions. These are now thoughts of the past, future, desires, aversions, etc., pulling you away from your task. So you're having a revolutionary new perspective on your inner life. Now you're lumping everything together into this group of not the breath. And if you are patient and committed, and you don't grasp onto feelings of frustration and doubt and discouragement when it gets difficult, just very, very gently but firmly returning to your task, then gradually you will see progress after some time. My teacher was fond of an analogy in which the moments of mindfulness can be compared to drops of water from a tap. So at the beginning, the moments of mindfulness are few and far between. This is rather like the tap, just drip, drip, drip. But as we persevere, the moments of mindfulness become extended and the periods of distraction become less. So now it's as if the drips of water have become more frequent, drip, 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 until finally the drips of water become a stream. And that stream of water, or the stream of mindfulness, is what we call samadhi. So samadhi is a stream of mindfulness which occurs when we let go of the 5 hindrances. So all the different defilements in the mind, the 5 defilements that the Buddha identified as being directly opposed to the cultivation of mindfulness, samadhi and wisdom, are the 5 hindrances. So samadhi begins where the 5 hindrances end. So whatever meditation technique you adopt, and there are so many to choose from, the commonality, the common goal is to take the mind beyond the 5 precepts. As long as the mind is still prey to any of the five hindrances, there is no samadhi, there is no insight, there is no wisdom. So this is our initial task. But please try to see every meditation as a learning experience rather than evaluating it as a good meditation or a bad meditation. There's something to learn in every meditation. One of the common mistakes that new meditators make is to confuse peace with relaxation. And so the most common phenomena is that as the mind becomes more relaxed, meditators get sleepy. Because there's a sense of accomplishment. Oh, now I've made it. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling relaxed. But relaxation is an accompaniment to this cultivation of the mind. And it can be a trap. The Buddha is the awakened one. And this is a practice of awakening, not a practice of relaxation. So as the mind becomes more relaxed, then increase your vigilance and alertness, and don't grasp onto that relaxation. It is not the goal of meditation. It's an accompaniment, it's a side effect, it's pleasant, a pleasant abiding, but be careful. So learning, exploring, looking closely at experience, developing skills for looking after your mind, managing your mind, because those skills are not only of use, during formal meditation. These are life skills. If you are practicing meditation on the path of the Buddha, formal meditation enables you to develop all kinds of skills that you can learn in your daily life, that you can make use of in your daily life. So this is a practice of putting forth effort, putting effort into our lives, not effort into our relationships, effort into our careers, but effort into our very life, the life itself. Namo tassā bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassā bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassā bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ Gunutarang upacchayang namasami. So before I start, if I could ask everyone to put down their phones and end all the photographs and recording going on. The monastery's making a recording for everyone. So this is the last day of my annual visit to India, and I first came to India in 1975 as a 17-year-old boy, and I know many people in this country probably dream of going to the UK. I was born, brought up in the UK, and dreamed only of coming to India. And as soon as I finished school, high school, I worked and made some money, and then began my journey to India overland, traveling by local buses and trains, and my favorite means of transport was hitchhiking. And I arrived in Amritsar in end of 75, hitchhiked to Delhi, spent a couple of days in Delhi, went to Agra to see the Taj Mahal, and then hitchhiked all the way to Pune. So that was my life as a teenager. I was in India for a whole year. So my connection with India has always been very strong, and as a bhikkhu I've returned on a number of occasions, and I've done a number of long walks through the countryside, pilgrimages from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath, from Bodh Gaya to Kusinara, in Maharashtra around Ajanta Ellora area. And this last couple of years been walking in the Maharashtrian countryside, visiting remote villages where there is a very devoted Buddhist community which has almost no opportunity to make merit or to listen to the Dhamma. And so following in the footsteps of my teachers and my teachers' teachers, going all the way back to the Lord Buddha himself, and walking through the countryside, making oneself available to share his understanding of the Dhamma. As my inspiration as a teenager came from two basic questions which preoccupied me greatly. The first was, what is the best way to live your life as a human being? And the second was that the world seems to be a place with so much suffering, so much pain, so much cruelty, injustice, violence. And my question was, does the world have to be like this? Can it be any better than this, even a little better than this? And if it can, what is your responsibility to promote that improvement or that change? And these two questions led me to read many books and eventually came across the teachings of the Lord Buddha, and it just made complete sense to me. I never had the feeling that these were exotic Asian philosophy, but just basic enlightened common sense, if you like. It's something that I'd felt I'd known at one point at some level and had somehow forgot. But the answers to my two questions were that a life devoted to following the Eightfold Path, studying, practicing, realizing its profound truth, was or is the best way to live a human life. And sharing the knowledge, the experience of that, following that path with others, would be, for me at least, the best way that I could, in a small way, help to make the world a slightly better place. As regards the how, practically speaking, I was going to achieve that, I wasn't so sure. So after almost 2 years away from England and from UK, and my parents assuming that after I came back I would go to university and so on, I had to tell them that I didn't want to do that. And then I signed up for a Vipassana meditation retreat. And the teacher of the retreat had been a monk in Thailand for a number of years. And in his Dhamma discourses, he would tell many stories of his life in the forest in Thailand. And I thought, yes, that's it. That's exactly it. That's the vessel for the life that I want to lead. To live by my values in a way that I would not have to compromise with the society and people around me. Life as a monk was surely suited me right down to the ground. So that was when I decided to go to Thailand. My father was born in a very poor family, and he'd had to leave school at an early age to help support his family. But he was a very intelligent and thoughtful man, and he'd rejected Christianity from an early age, just as I also did. But for him, that resulted in a general kind of aversion to all religion. And he had great hopes for me, and that I was very good at school in the conventional sense, top of my class, and nobody in my family, either on my father's side or my mother's side, had ever been to university. And so my father's great dream was that I would go to Oxford or Cambridge and become an academic, professor even. And so I had to break the news to my father that I was not going to go to university. Not only that, that I wanted to become a monk, a Buddhist monk. And not only that, I wanted to become a Buddhist monk thousands of miles away on the other side of the world. So you can imagine it was a difficult conversation for me to even begin to tell my father this. And my father said, you know, I don't know anything about Buddhism, but as your father, I want you to be happy. And if you've really thought this through and you're really convinced that this is the way to live your life, that you can be happy, I have no objections. And that was a turning point in my relationship with my father, because to see someone who is so selflessly willing to give up every dream that they've cherished for years and years, probably since I was a young boy, and to make it quite clear that although they would prefer he would prefer I didn't become a monk, that my happiness, and my happiness as I saw it in the path that I'd chosen, was something that he would respect. And my happiness came first before his wishes for me. So that was a really, I would say, a healing moment in my family life. And I said, actually, you know, I need to ask your permission. I've more or less told you this is what I want to do, but strictly speaking, would you give me your written permission? And he said, yes, I can do that. So I went to Thailand, and very fortunate to, I'm summarizing rather. Before I went to Thailand, I spent some months with Ajahn Sumedho, who was Ajahn Chah, my teacher's senior Western disciple, in the English countryside before traveling to Thailand in late 1978. And Ajahn Chah, as I'm sure some of you will know, spoke no English at all. There were monks, Western monks there who could translate, perhaps not so well, but good enough. But for me, the most important thing was not being able to understand his teachings that he gave. Of course, that was important. But I'd read a lot of books already by then. I had a good grasp of the basic principles. But what for me was priceless was this incredible faith that arose out of nowhere in him as an arahant. So of course I had no psychic powers. I can't tell, I couldn't tell who's an arahant, who's not an arahant. It was this faith that arose. And in later years I tried to express this in a poem that I wrote, and the image that I used was that it was as if I'd lived in a world full of plastic flowers, and that's what I thought a flower was. And then one day I come across a real fresh flower, and I said, oh, this is what a flower is. This is what a flower is. All I've known before is a plastic flower. Some very beautiful, but this is, and that sense of the the timelessness of the Dhamma, that this is not a teaching that led to liberation for many beings in the time of the Lord Buddha, but is now becoming almost impossible to realize. But here was this human being before me, and I felt convinced that, yes, this is the meaning of a true human being, of a perfected human being, of someone who is beyond all greed, hatred, and delusion. And he himself would make this point in a very beautiful way. He would never claim any attainments. He wouldn't ever talk about his own personal practice. But what he did do was talk about his faults and his difficulties as a young monk. And it was so empowering for all of us young monks and novices, because he's saying, I'm not so different from all of you. I started off where you are. I had so many problems and struggles in my 20s as a young monk. And the difference between me and you is that I stuck it out. I was patient. I didn't give up. And I felt this was so inspiring as a teacher as a teacher, you realize people are all willing to put you on a pedestal, make you into a god, certainly a teacher of his stature. And he would not allow that to take place. And he would send people away if they showed too much devotion to him as an individual. He didn't want that. He was a doctor. And just as a doctor doesn't want the patient to be hanging around the doctor, he wanted, here's your medicine, take it, and get better. That's what he wanted. And he showed you there is a path right here and right now. And there were monks from many different countries already in the early 80s, so many. And of course, Luang Por couldn't teach any of them in their own language. And so many people would be puzzled by this. So, Luang Por, you've got these monks from other countries, and most of them have university degrees, and bachelor degrees, master's degrees, doctor's degrees. And he said, how do you teach them? And he said, these Westerners, they're like buffalo. You put a ring through their nose and you pull them this way and you pull them that way, and before long they get the hang of it. So we really like that, because as Westerners sometimes some of the Thai monks, and it's the same in other countries, tend to be kind of flatter the Western monks, or maybe make too much out of them. And we like that kind of, I certainly like that kind of approach much more. So the teacher is someone who makes you do things you don't want to, things you wouldn't do by yourself probably, because he has more faith in your potential than you do yourself. So living by yourself without a teacher, it's possible, it's practice. Certainly these days with the access to teachings, unprecedented. I mean, we're so fortunate you can just look at your telephone and listen to great teachings on YouTube. I mean, this is unimaginable for 99.9% of Buddhists who've ever lived in the world. Nevertheless, being in the presence of someone of this stature, it brings the best out of you. You feel this compulsion to be mindful. You fear not being mindful because he's got eagle eyes and he'll know immediately. So so practicing alone, there are so many traps to fall into, and so many ways in which we can deceive ourselves. And with him, you had someone who, even though he didn't speak my language or our language, you knew he understood you completely. And his teachings were very straightforward. And it's not that he was always so eloquent or that he gave teachings that never heard before, because as I said, a lot of us had probably read too many books. But the difference was that when he said something, even quite off-the-cuff remark, you remembered it. It just went straight to your heart. And you had this feeling, again, it's not something that you can measure in a way, but you had this feeling, this is coming from his experience. It's not coming from a book. It's not coming from memory. And so in teaching, this is the, any kind of teaching context, whether it's parents teaching children or whatever, something that we tend to forget is it's not the content of what you say, it's the context with which, and the feelings, the perceptions that we have of each other. You have to open yourself to the teachings. So mindfulness was, a word that we hear every day. And practicing mindfulness, being mindful, is embedded in the monk's lifestyle. The Vinaya, the monastic discipline, many lay Buddhists will be familiar with this term somewhat, and even know that there are 227 rules in the Patimokkha discipline, but those 227 rules are only one part of the Vinaya. And there are a huge number of rules and observances which lie outside of the Patimokkha. Thousands. And these rules were given great regulations, protocols, customs, were given great importance at Wat Pah Pong. And so you were constantly being grounded in the material world. And it's like everything has a right way and a wrong way to do it. How you fold your bag, how you put your robe on, how you carry your bowl, how you put your bowl down, where you put your bowl down. So many details that you learn. And this is indicative of the understanding of sati, or right mindfulness, in Buddha Dhamma. So a quick, very succinct kind of definition would be, I would say, would be bringing to mind and bearing in mind. This is the meaning of sati. So as many of you, I'm sure, know, that mindfulness is kind of a big deal these days throughout the world, particularly what's called secular mindfulness. And as a bhikkhu, we have kind of mixed feelings about this, in the sense that on the one hand, one can't help but feel glad and anumotana and appreciate the fact that this kind of mental training and a systematic effort to take responsibility for one's mental health and well-being is now so popular throughout the world. But on the other hand, as bhikkhus, we are like the guardians, if you could say, of the tradition, and cannot help but notice that the word mindfulness is being used in many different ways these days. And this is a very common phenomena, that when a teaching is taken out of its context and it enters the lay world, then it tends to be affected by all kinds of social, cultural, economic, commercial influences and powers. And just as when I was young and seeing how this happened to practice of asana yoga in the West, and before long you had this kind of, hot yoga and cold yoga and fast yoga and slow yoga and this yoga and that yoga, and it becomes part of the whole worldly zeitgeist and worldly culture. And I think this is a danger with mindfulness. One of the, I think, quite interesting or criticisms that I read of the secular mindfulness group is of corporations who arrange mindfulness retreats. And of course you say, well, isn't that a good thing? Well, yes and no, but in the case that corporations are not caring for their employees and putting pressure on them to work such long hours or uncongenial conditions and so on, to the extent that everyone's really stressed out. And then by having mindfulness retreats, it's basically saying, you're the problem. The reason you're stressed out is because you're not mindful. And this relates to a very important principle in, well, no more than one, but I'll begin with the principle that the Buddha taught Dhamma Vinaya. Now that was how he related to his teaching. There wasn't really a concept of religion, or in the way that we have these days. So there was the Siddhartha Gautama's Dhamma, and he referred to it either as this brahmacharya or this Dhamma Vinaya. And so Dhamma is the inner practice, and Vinaya is the external practice. So most simply, Vinaya means all the ways in which we seek to create the most conducive situations and conditions for everyone to grow in the Dhamma. And this can take the form of laws, regulations, customs, protocols, agreements, all the ways in which we try to manipulate our surroundings to bring it into line, to harmonize, to support the practice of Dhamma. So the idea that the Buddha's teaching is a very kind of individual, internal kind of thing, is just make your mind peaceful and let the world go its way, at least you won't suffer about it. That was never the Buddha's teaching. as quite a serious misinterpretation or misrepresentation of what the Buddha was teaching. So the Buddha never overlooked the power of external situation. A very simple example: if you're living in an area which is unsafe, and every time you leave the house, or perhaps more importantly, every time someone you love leaves the house to go outside somewhere, whether it's your spouse or especially your children, you're on edge because it's just not safe. Then even if you have time to meditate and you have the all the teachings and you know what you're doing, that basic feeling of jeopardy, of being in danger or being unsafe, or your loved ones being unsafe, will mean it's very unlikely that you'll really be able to progress in the Dhamma. And the Buddha, there's one very memorable teaching in which the Buddha one day, as was his practice, early in the morning, he used his psychic powers to determine whether there was anyone in that local area who had spiritual maturity to realize the Dhamma. And he became aware that there was a cowherder some distance away. And so he walked to the town where this cowherder lived to give him a teaching that would allow him to realize the Dhamma. It so happened that day that one of the cowherder's cows escaped, and he was running around chasing after this cow. Meanwhile, the news of the Buddha's arrival spread everywhere. The town center was full of people. All the elders and the senior people were all waiting politely for the Lord Buddha to begin his discourse. And the Buddha just sat silently. He wouldn't begin his discourse until this cowherder had arrived. Finally, the cowherder captured the cow and arrived, and he was totally exhausted. And the Buddha saw he'd arrived, and then he said to someone, I'm not quite ready to give the talk yet. Please take this fellow away and give him something to eat. So they did this. They could puzzle why was this a big deal. And then he came back after he'd been nourished, and the Buddha gave a talk, and he truly became enlightened. And this may seem to be a minor point in the sutta, but it really points to the fact that the Buddha recognized that if we lack the four requisites, food, shelter, clothing, medicines in time of sickness, no matter our spiritual capacity and maturity, we will not be able to progress in Dhamma. Once you go beyond the basic security with regards to the four requisites, an increase in wealth does not have any spiritual benefits, probably the opposite. But the Dhamma cannot really enter our minds. We can't open ourselves to the Dhamma. We can't receive the Dhamma until we have a certain level of physical security, particularly with regard to the four requisites. And so coming back to this case of some external threat or some upset of one kind or another, many Buddhists will assume, this is my practice. Let's say you're in an office and there's somebody whose behavior is really obnoxious, is a bully, or else takes all the credit for work that other people have done, or selfish, And so I'm sure you have many examples. And this kind of person, this kind of behavior. Many Buddhists will think, this is my practice, not to get angry with this guy or this woman. And then when they're able to put down their resentment and their anger, they feel, yeah, now I'm really getting somewhere in the Dhamma. But putting down anger and resentment and so on is not the end of the story. We put down the resentment and the anger and so on because it's only then that we can think clearly and come up with a suitable solution to the problem of this person's behavior, which is taking place in the office, in the family, and affecting it. It's not simply a matter of being at peace with what's going on. There has to be more of a proactive approach and saying, this is a sila issue. This is not just a samadhi issue or a banya issue. And in the Sangha, this is why the Vinaya reaches its peak in the Sangha itself, because this was an institution which the Buddha was able to design himself. Every single rule was laid down by the Lord Buddha. Whereas in society at large, the Buddha was able to lay down some basic principles, but the extent to which they were applied on the macro level or in communities would vary greatly. But we see Vinaya at its best, or potentially at its best, in the monastic order. This is one of the reasons why we have respect for this institution. So when I teach the monks in Thailand, I would say, what is it that makes a monk different from a lay person? From the day that you put on the robe. Often, some people see lay people bowing and paying respects to monks, and they worry. They don't think, don't the monks get kind of proud and puffed up when people are bowing to them all the time? And my experience, and many people, is no, it's quite the opposite. It makes monks uncomfortable because they will say, I'm just so full of defilement, and these people, they seem so pure and so full of faith, and they come to bow to me. And my answer is, well, they're not bowing to you, they're bowing to what you represent to them, not you as an individual necessarily. And lay people, and you can put me right if I'm getting this wrong, but my impression is that it's the commitment to the practice and the sacrifices that are made by someone who enters the Sangha, which makes them worthy of respect from day one. I'm saying what makes you a monk from day one is not the Dhamma in your heart, it's the Vinaya. That's what makes you different. So that's why it's so important as a monk to keep the Vinaya, because this is who you are on the conventional level. And this is why lay people provide us with the four requisites, look after us, help us to practice. There's a contract there. We are living as monks and following the Vinaya of Lord Buddha. So I don't think anywhere, if you see a son and he's obedient to his father, I don't think people go up and say, what a good son you are, you're obedient to your father. Any son will say, well, yeah, that's it, he's my dad, of course. But as bhikkhus, it's the same. It's like the Buddha is our father. And why there's no such thing as a strict monk. You have gratitude and love and appreciation for the Lord Buddha, and the Lord Buddha laid down the Vinaya for us as the framework in which we live our lives. And we repay the debt of gratitude by keeping the rules, on the most basic level. So each of the rules, sikkhapadas, these are objects of recollection. They are objects of mindfulness. And in lay life, similarly, the 5 precepts, or on a poster day like today, you take 8 precepts. These are the basic mindfulness practices. These are what you are mindful of. This is what gives you your compass in daily life. So mindfulness is not just that sort of present moment awareness. And my criticism, I agreed with the criticism of some companies and corporations who really they should do something about the working conditions of their employees and make them more pleasant and a more humane place to live their lives, rather than saying your problem is you're not mindful enough and you should do mindfulness meditation. The practice of living together and how we live in our families, how we live in our community. This is mindfulness practice applied in daily life, and are objects of mindfulness. To begin with are the 5 precepts or the 8 precepts. And I call these the hooks for mindfulness. You can't just be mindful, like this sort of floating quality of mindfulness. You always have to be mindful of something. So you have to be very clear what you're being mindful of. And as I say, to keep you on the right track and prevent any real disasters in your life, keep the 5 precepts. Be mindful of the 5 precepts. Now, I'll give you a simple example of this. Like for most people, we're living where there are a lot of mosquitoes around. In the evening, particularly, many people don't have any real kind of hatred of mosquitoes, but they just slap them and do this. They just don't even think about it. And Ajahn Chah used to say, any moment of mindfulness is like you're dead, basically. It's like you're dead to the truth of things. You're dead to goodness. And so many people spend most of their lives in this kind of zombie state. It's a state based on instinct and habit. And there's no real awareness. So how do you go from that state of no awareness to awareness? It sounds good, but practically speaking, well, you have objects of recollection. In this case, the first precept. So when you take a precept, what it means is you bring it in and you have to reflect on it regularly. It has to be right there in the front of your mind. It has to come to bear on how you live your life for it to be a true precept. So let's say in this case, you've taken this first precept and a mosquito bites, and out of the old habit, you're going to swat the mosquito. But then let's say that the mindfulness of the precept pops up into your mind. You say, oh, I almost broke my precept there. This is such an important moment. This is how we cut that stream of ignorance, a stream of kind of zombie consciousness. And you wake up. What do you wake up to? You wake up to your values. And the whole realm of what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, what's kusala, what's akusala. All those considerations pop up into your mind because you've made a space for them. And you made your space for them by waking up to what you're doing through recollection of your precept. So there's an initial moment of discomfort, and that's the dukkha. So you also need patience. and then that passes away. And seeing how the impulse to, that blind impulse to take a life of a mosquito is not who you are, simply becoming aware of it and not acting upon it, it passes away. So this is the very first, like, baby steps to vipassana, come through keeping precepts. And so and you can expand upon this. Probably the most difficult precept to keep, I would say, most people would agree, is the fourth precept. Because you can't just stop speaking. You can't say, oh, so much defilement, so many lies coming out of me, I'm just going to stop speaking for a while. Unless you go on a retreat and you're in a room all by yourself for a few days. But it's not sustainable, is it? So how can you go to right speech? Well, you start off by having this thought in your mind, I'm not going to lie. No lies, no lies. And having that, it illuminates all of the intentions to lie. And they're probably a lot more than you would like to think. But you make it, you illuminate, you're able to see it, you're aware of it, you're awake to those intentions because of holding in your mind, being mindful of that precept not to tell lies. Simply that can make a huge effect on your life. Now you can take it further than that. You can elaborate on these principles. The 5 precepts are just basic daily life mindfulness objects. As I say, the importance or the huge significance of the 5 precepts is, if you can keep those 5 precepts, you're not going to be creating bad karma, which is going to cause suffering in this life and next life. You can get back on board. You'll lose your mindfulness, you'll do stupid things, say stupid things. But as long as you're basically keeping those 5 precepts, you are safe. My teacher said, you look after the precepts, they'll look after you. Now, one way of taking this practice a further step is to use the 5 principles of supasita, or good speech, right speech. And so we're going beyond simply not lying or telling the truth. That's number 1. But secondly, saying things which are useful to the listener. Thirdly, at the right time and place. Fourthly, with goodwill and kindness. Fifth, with politeness. So now this is the next level of this mindfulness practice. So you're holding 5 things in your mind. In fact, the time and place is the number 1. Is this the right time? Is this the right place to talk about this matter, especially important matters? If you're come home from work or it's late at night and you're tired, it's not a good time to talk about difficult matters. If you're really upset, angry, it's not a good time. If the person that you want to speak to is stressed out or they're in a bad mood or so on, it's not a good time. So this is another thing, you bear it in mind, you're mindful of it constantly. Is this the right time? Is this the right place? Or maybe you start a conversation and you realize it's going in completely wrong direction, and you say, take some time out. Can we come back to this a little bit later on? I just need a short break, or go to the bathroom or something, have a cup of tea, start again. Be aware of time and place. Be aware of the content. And so the criteria for content is benefit, usefulness. Okay? So we're having the first criteria, the first thing is time and place. And in terms of content, we have 2 things. 1, it's true, and 2, it's beneficial. And then in terms of your intention and your mental state, then there should be goodwill, at least not anger and hatred and aversion or trying to get one over on somebody or something akusala. So keeping an eye on your mental state, the citta, and fifthly, the choice of words, being polite. And that would also, I think, extend to body language, which we're often very lack awareness of our tone of voice, lack awareness of our body language, and so because we're so focused on content of what we're speaking, that we overlook the importance of creating the conditions for the other person to receive that content. So creating communication skills do not just happen by themselves. There's effort that's needed, and mindfulness of these points can help. So let's just go back right towards the beginning, as I've been speaking for quite a long time already. But right mindfulness has to be embedded in this holistic system of education, which we call the Eightfold Path. So something that I talk about a lot is that religions in the world are of different species or different groupings, and the group of religions, the species or the set of religions that grew up in the Middle East have incredible prestige, and they tend to dominate how people understand what religion means. And those religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, are belief system religions. They are religion as belief system, adoption of beliefs, primarily in things that you are not able to prove. You have a choice, believe or not believe. There are dogmas and you have to believe them, and believing them means that now you're a part of that religion. Not believing them means that you're not. Indian religions are of a different species, and particularly Buddha Dhamma, it's an education system religion. It's very different. And so much of the confusion about Buddhism comes from looking at an education system religion, which is Dhamma, through the eyes of a belief system religion. And it's long been this sort of we're going back to a colonial period now. The Western colonial project is to persuade everyone that Western values are universal values. And this manifests in the realm of religion. So we say what a religion is, and you have to conform to our idea of what a religion is. Otherwise, you're not a religion. You're a philosophy, or you're a way of life, or something like this. So I think we should say, no, we're a different kind of religion. We're a belief system religion. We're not a belief system religion. We're an education system religion. And the objects of faith in Buddha Dhamma are verifiable. And so the challenge is not to believe without doubt, but the challenge is to put the teachings to the test of experience. And the Buddha gave this beautiful title. This is Bhati Bhati Puja. You pay homage to the Buddha by sincerely trying to apply the teachings to your life and putting them to the test. So in Buddhism, we're not believing in things outside of our capacity to verify, but the Buddha is saying, you can abandon the unwholesome. If you could not, I would not tell you to do it. You can develop the wholesome. If you could not, I wouldn't tell you to do it. You can purify your mind. So this is a challenge. It's not just something you take on. Now I'm Buddhist, I believe that. Because if if you have an authentic belief, you say, well, you have to give it a try. And you put those teachings to the test, right from the most basic teachings, and as you verify them, even in a very fundamental way, it's a very unique kind of faith that arises. It's a faith based upon experience. It's a faith that says, yes, that's so true. oh yes, that's really right. And when the Buddha tells me to do this, yes, it does have that result. And when I refrain from that, yes, it is like that. And so this constant reinforcement of faith through practice is what gives us the faith, the strength. And this faith, in many cases, is trust. So what happens when we come across teachings about deva realms and heavens and hells and all these things that are so way outside of our experience? Is it a question of believing or not believing? It's not like you signed on as a Buddhist, that means you just believe in this stuff. No, the Buddha didn't want that. But what we can say is that in every teaching that the Buddha has taught, that we have been able to put to the test, every single one has proved correct. On the basis of that, we have a trust in the wisdom and the compassion of the Lord Buddha when he teaches about things that so far we cannot verify. So although Dhamma is Sandittika Dhamma, it's verifiable Dhamma, it's not verifiable by everyone. And just as quantum physics or any advanced subject is the same. You have to put in the work. So our attitude is, yes, I don't know that for myself as yet, but in the meantime, I'm happy to take on Buddha's teachings as a working hypothesis because I trust in his wisdom and his compassion. And the Buddha says, accepting the existence of other realms, existence of rebirth, existence of devas and so on, even as a working hypothesis, is of great benefit to your progress in Dhamma, long-term progress in Dhamma. So you may not see that yet, but you take it on trust, not out of blind faith, but because this is a really reliable source, the most reliable source, someone who's never let you down. And you can ask people who've gone further on the path and they will have the same response. You know, in the world you can have all these worldly goals and strive for them, and then finally, maybe you're 40 or you're 50 and you've made it, and what is there deep inside you? Is that all there is? I thought there was something more than that, and maybe some people don't like to even talk about it because it's kind of disturbing. But most, I would say, worldly goals and aspirations are ultimately disappointing on one level or another. But the spiritual goal is not. 2,500 years, there's never been a single, as far as I know, a single Arya Pugala who realizes the Dhamma and says, I thought it'd be a bit better than that. All that work I put in, and I could have been out enjoying myself. No, quite the opposite. Wow, so much more than one thought. So this education system that the Buddha gave us, when it's concentrated into 3 trainings, the dry sikha, sila, samadhi, panya. Sikha, what does that mean? Sikha means training. And in Thai language, it's the same word, it's the root of the word that's used for education. So we say the threefold training is threefold education. Education of your conduct, education of your emotions and your heart, educations of your thinking and your wisdom. So we become Buddhists, we truly take refuge, we become truly human through embarking and applying ourselves to this education system. So in some religions, like the more religious you are, the more fanatic you become, and the more heedless of lives of people who are not like you can become, the more intense your faith in Dhamma is, even one single ant, even one single mosquito, you wouldn't take their life. It's a beautiful, because we are not intent on belief, like Buddhism has always been distinguished by its acceptance of diversity. Because we don't want to change anybody's mind and make them think like us. And the Buddhas came up with these phrases of sabbe satta. That's such an incredible phrase. Have you ever thought about that? All beings, in all realms, in every realm of existence, we have metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. Not just fellow Buddhists or people in our group, our ethnic group, people with the same color skin, or not even only humans. All existence in every realm. This is the universality of the Buddha's teaching. So as bhikkhus, we're not even allowed to teach anyone who doesn't ask us to be taught. But we make ourselves available. We dress like this so people know, oh, this is a Buddhist monk. They can come up and ask questions if they like. But we're not going to impose our views and our beliefs on other people. And that would be a kind of a violence against them. But if people are interested enough to come up with respect, then we share. So these kind of basic Buddhist values are really important to bear in mind. This system of education is a holistic system. It's not a step-by-step system. So let's take the Eightfold Path and bring it down to three: Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Samadhi in the threefold training does not mean samadhi. It doesn't mean concentration. It means the training of the heart, adhijita sikha. So in certain areas of practice, the sila is at the fore. Like I was saying, dealing with a problem in the office. Okay, you look after your heart, but also you have to sit down and say, look, this is not working. How we need to rethink how we're treating each other and so on. You may have some meetings or speak with the superior, whatever. But this is basically a sila problem. But any kind of sila problem, behavioral problem out there in the world, then there must be the training of the heart, develop mindfulness, patience, metta, and backing it up. And that wisdom and wise consideration, yoniso manasikara, plays a supporting role. In certain areas, the training of the heart is to the fore, but sila and panya are playing a supporting role. In the time of wisdom, development, sila and samadhi are playing the supporting role. So in any area, any phase of practice, one of those three kinds of training will be out there playing the main role, but the other two will be supporting. So satipatthana or sati cannot be taken out of that context. Let's say someone is a bank robber, and I don't know whether they still do it like this, but when I was a kid in movies, they do it like this, like with trying open the safe. And it's so focused, so present, maybe even their ears really sharply attuned to presence of a police siren. Well, are they being mindful? Totally aware of what they're doing in the present moment? Why not? Why is that not mindfulness? Well, because it lacks that hiriyottappa. So there's no mindfulness without hiriyottappa and a recognition of kusala and akusala. So to be mindful in the Buddhist sense, you have to take on these basic categories and be able to be willing to look at things that go on in the mind and divide them into wholesome and unwholesome, and to recognize that you need to protect the mind against the unwholesome, and when the unwholesome does arise, you need to let it go. You need to bring kusala qualities into the heart and develop those that are already there, bring them to maturity. So you're being mindful within a context, within the Buddhist concept of samadhi. It's not a kind of being aware of something going on and know it's going on. It means you're aware of the meaning of it, and the meaning of it within the context of Buddha Dhamma. So this is turning into a very long talk, and I maybe I'll bring it to close shortly, and then we can switch to kind of Q&A mode. Yes, so mindfulness means mindful of something. And come back to, like as a monk, you're mindful of, okay, what's that? Is that allowable for a monk to drink or not? Has it been properly offered? Like a monk can only consume food and drink which has been specifically placed into his hand. If somebody places that, please go ahead, have a drink. Even with great kindness, monk can't touch it because it's not been properly offered. And so many of these rules that just become part of your life as a monk. You may think, wow, that must be so kind of oppressive as a Buddhist monk. Everything you do, every movement you make, you have some kind of rule or other. That sounds kind of really weird and alien way to live your life. But do you drive a car? If you drive a car, just think of how many rules you keep every time you drive a car. Like really important rules about driving on this side of the road, about indicating when you turn right and you turn left and so on, and all the rules about looking after the engine and the car, and then a highway code. So, what is the highway code? Highway code is objects of mindfulness. You're mindful of the highway code. You're mindful of all these different, but you don't feel it. It's like a pressure on you. I'm just driving my car, because you've integrated this, that it's just a natural way for you to drive a car. And this is what happens for bhikkhu. You integrate the vinaya to the extent that you have the same sense that I imagine that you have when you drive a car. So mindfulness needs an object. So if I'll maybe leave it at that. Be aware of what is your object. In Satipatthana you have body, feelings, the mind itself, and mental objects. Generally be aware, have a clear sense of what you're being aware of, for what purpose. So yes, I'll end the talk at this point.